The fluorescent lights in Jefferson Middle School's hallway flickered with their usual tired rhythm as 12-year-old Maya Richardson pressed her back against her locker, clutching her worn backpack like a shield. It was the Tuesday before Christmas break, and the air should have been filled with excitement and holiday cheer. Instead, Maya felt the familiar knot tightening in her stomach as she heard their voices approaching, Brittany Chen and her two constant companions, Madison Parker and Ashley Williams. They were 8th graders, queens of the school's social hierarchy, and for reasons Maya had never fully understood, they had decided she was their favorite target. Maya had transferred to Jefferson Middle 3 months ago when her mother took a job across town. She had been nervous but hopeful, carrying with her a carefully cultivated optimism that this school would be different from the last. She was a quiet girl with intelligent brown eyes, natural hair pulled back in 2 neat puffs, and a gentle way of moving through the world that her grandmother called having grace. Her clothes were clean but clearly second-hand, her sneakers were scuffed from heavy use, and she carried herself with a dignity that seemed to irritate certain people for reasons she could not comprehend. The first incident had been small. Brittany had accidentally knocked Maya's lunch tray to the floor in the cafeteria, sending spaghetti and green beans across the tiles while dozens of students looked on. Maya had knelt to clean it up, her face burning, while Brittany and her friends laughed and walked away. The cafeteria monitor had barely looked up from her phone. The next week, someone had written "Go back where you came from" on Maya's math worksheet when she stepped away from her desk. Then her gym shoes disappeared from her locker, only to be found in the toilet. Each incident was followed by Brittany's cold smile in the hallway, a smile that said she knew exactly what was happening and knew Maya could not prove anything. Now, as the 3 girls approached, Maya tried to make herself smaller. She could hear Madison's high-pitched giggle, the sound that always preceded something cruel. "Hey, Maya," Brittany called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Nice hair. Did you do it yourself, or did your mom take you to the dollar store salon?" Ashley snorted with laughter. Maya's hands moved instinctively to her hair, touching the puffs her mother had carefully styled that morning before her double shift at the hospital. She wanted to respond, to defend herself, to say something clever and cutting that would make them leave her alone. But the words stuck in her throat, and she hated herself for her silence. Brittany stepped closer, and Maya could smell the expensive perfume she wore, something that probably cost more than Maya's entire winter wardrobe. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" Brittany reached out and flicked one of Maya's hair puffs, hard enough to hurt. "Or maybe you just can't speak proper English." The comment made no sense. Maya was an honor student with perfect grammar, but it landed like all the others, burrowing into the soft places where her confidence used to live. The bell rang, saving Maya from having to respond. The 3 girls sauntered away, leaving Maya standing alone in the emptying hallway, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. That afternoon, Maya sat in Mrs. Patterson's English class, trying to focus on the discussion of A Christmas Carol. Mrs. Patterson was one of the few teachers who seemed to genuinely see her students as individuals rather than just faces in rows. She was a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense teaching style that Maya admired. "What do you think Dickens is trying to tell us about redemption?" Mrs. Patterson asked the class. "Can people really change their nature, or are we all trapped by our circumstances?" Several hands went up, but Maya kept hers down, as she always did. She had learned that speaking up in class only drew more attention, more opportunities for Brittany and her friends to mock her later. But Mrs. Patterson's eyes found her anyway. "Maya, I would love to hear your thoughts on this." Maya's heart hammered. She could feel Brittany's eyes on her from 2 rows over. "I think," Maya began quietly, that people can change if they want to. But sometimes they need something to shake them up first. Something that makes them see things differently. Mrs. Patterson nodded encouragingly. That is a very insightful observation. Can you give us an example from the text? Before Maya could respond, Brittany's voice cut through the room. Maybe Scrooge should have just ignored the ghosts and stayed rich. That seems smarter to me. The comment was directed at Mrs. Patterson, but the intention was clear: to interrupt Maya, to steal her moment. Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Brittany, Maya was speaking. Please let her finish. But the moment was broken, and Maya mumbled, "That's okay, I'm done," before sinking lower in her seat. She saw Mrs. Patterson's lips press together in frustration, but the teacher simply nodded and moved the discussion forward. Maya stared at her copy of the book, the words blurring as she fought back the familiar sting of tears. After class, as students filed out, Mrs. Patterson called out, "Maya, could you stay back for a moment, please?" Maya's stomach dropped. She had not done anything wrong, but being singled out always felt dangerous. She approached the teacher's desk slowly, her backpack hanging from one shoulder. Mrs. Patterson waited until the last student left, then closed the door gently. "Sit down, sweetheart," she said, gesturing to a desk in the front row. Maya sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Mrs. Patterson pulled up a chair and sat beside her, not behind her desk in the position of authority, but next to her, as an equal. "Maya, I have been teaching for 23 years, she began softly, "and in that time, I have learned to recognize certain patterns. I see you, child. I see what is happening in my classroom and in these hallways." Maya's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. "You are a brilliant student with a beautiful mind," Mrs. Patterson continued. "Your essays show depth and empathy. Your test scores are exceptional. But I watch you shrink yourself every single day, and it breaks my heart." "I'm okay," Maya whispered automatically, the response she had practiced 1,000 times. Mrs. Patterson shook her head gently. "No, baby, you're not. And you don't have to be. What Brittany Chen and her friends are doing to you, that is not okay. It is not normal adolescent behavior. It is targeted harassment, and it is wrong." Maya's carefully constructed walls began to crack. "I don't want to make it worse," she said, her voice barely audible. "If I tell someone, if I report it, they will just get meaner. They will make sure everyone hates me. I just want to get through the year." Mrs. Patterson's expression was both sad and fierce. "I understand that fear, Maya. I truly do. But silence protects the bully, not the victim. Every time we let these things pass without consequence, we are telling the Brittanness of the world that their behavior is acceptable." She reached out and gently touched Maya's hand. "I cannot force you to report what is happening. But I want you to know that if you ever decide you are ready, I will stand beside you. I will be your witness. You are not alone in this, even when it feels like you are." The conversation stayed with Maya as she walked home that afternoon, her breath forming small clouds in the December cold. Her mother would not be home until late, another double shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse's aide. Maya would heat up leftovers, do her homework, and probably fall asleep on the couch waiting for her mother to return. It was their routine, one born of necessity rather than choice. Her father had left when Maya was 6, and her mother had been working herself to exhaustion ever since, trying to provide a stable life for her only child. As Maya turned onto her street, she saw Mrs. Henderson, their elderly neighbor, struggling to carry groceries up her front steps. Mrs. Henderson was a tiny white woman in her 70s who lived alone and had always been kind to Maya and her mother. Without thinking, Maya jogged over. "Let me help you with those, Mrs. Henderson." The old woman's face lit up with relief. "Oh, Maya, you are such a blessing. These old bones aren't what they used to be." Together, they carried the bags inside Mrs. Henderson's warm, cookie-scented house. "Wait right here," Mrs. Henderson said, disappearing into her kitchen. She returned with a small wrapped package. "I was going to wait until Christmas, but I want you to have this now." Maya carefully unwrapped the package to find a beautiful journal with a leather cover and thick cream-colored pages. "I know you like to write," Mrs. Henderson said with a gentle smile. "I thought you might need a special place for your thoughts." Maya hugged the journal to her chest, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of the gesture. "Thank you so much," she whispered. "This is the nicest gift anyone has ever given me." Mrs. Henderson patted her cheek. "You're a special girl, Maya. Don't let anyone tell you different. The world needs more people like you, people who stop to help an old lady with her groceries even when they have their own troubles weighing them down." That night, alone in the small apartment she shared with her mother, Maya opened the journal. She stared at the blank first page for a long time, thinking about Mrs. Patterson's words, about Brittany's cruelty, about the weight she carried every day. Finally, she began to write. "I don't know why they hate me. I don't know what I did to deserve this. But I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of making myself small. My grandmother used to say that dignity is something no one can take from you unless you hand it over. I think I've been handing mine over, piece by piece, every time I stay silent. Maybe it's time to take it back." The next morning, Maya walked into Jefferson Middle with a different kind of determination. She was not suddenly brave, fear still coiled in her stomach like a living thing, but she had made a decision. She would document everything. Every comment, every shove, every cruel laugh. She would build a record, evidence that could not be dismissed or ignored. In her backpack, tucked safely between her textbooks, was her new journal. Throughout the day, whenever something happened, she would find a quiet moment and write it down with dates and times and witnesses. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. During lunch, as Maya sat alone at a corner table with her book, Brittany and her friends approached. "Look, it's little Maya, all by herself again," Madison said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Doesn't she have any friends? Oh wait, I forgot, nobody likes her." Ashley chimed in, "Maybe she smells." "Do you smell, Maya?" Brittany leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Maya's ears. "You don't belong here. This school is for people who matter, not charity cases like you. Why don't you do everyone a favor and leave?" Maya's hands trembled beneath the table, but she kept her face carefully neutral. She had learned that reacting was what they wanted, that tears or anger only fueled their entertainment. She said nothing, just marked her page in her book and stood to leave. As she walked away, she heard their laughter following her, but this time, she did not let it burrow inside. This time, she walked straight to the library, found a quiet corner, and pulled out her journal. She wrote down every word they had said, the time, the location, and the names of at least 6 students who had been close enough to hear. She dated the entry and moved on to her homework. The pattern continued for the next week. Brittany seemed to sense that something had shifted in Maya, and it made her escalate. The comments became more frequent and more vicious. Someone emptied Maya's backpack in the hallway, scattering her books and papers across the floor. Her locker was vandalized with permanent marker. A note was slipped into her desk that read, "Kill yourself. Nobody wants you here." Each incident was quietly documented in Maya's journal, building a detailed record that grew heavier with each page. Maya told no one what she was doing, not even Mrs. Patterson, though she could feel the teacher's concerned eyes on her during class. The breaking point came 4 days before Christmas. The school was hosting a holiday assembly, and the gym was packed with students sitting on bleachers. Maya had found a spot near the back, hoping to remain invisible, but Brittany and her friends spotted her. They climbed up and squeezed into the row behind her, whispering loudly enough for Maya to hear every word. "Did you see what she's wearing? Probably bought it at Goodwill. So pathetic. I heard her mom cleans toilets for a living. Like mother, like daughter, both trash. Why doesn't she just drop out? She's bringing down the whole school's reputation." Maya sat rigid, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. Around her, other students shifted uncomfortably, some glancing at her with pity, others looking away. No one spoke up. No one told Brittany to stop. The assembly began, but Maya heard none of it. She was drowning in humiliation, in the crushing weight of being publicly degraded while dozens of people watched and did nothing. When the assembly finally ended and students began to file out, Maya remained seated, unable to move. Mrs. Patterson, who had been supervising from the floor, climbed up to where Maya sat. "Come with me," she said quietly, and Maya followed on shaking legs. They went to Mrs. Patterson's empty classroom. The teacher locked the door, turned to Maya, and said simply, "Show me." Maya did not pretend not to understand. With trembling hands, she pulled the journal from her backpack and handed it over. Mrs. Patterson read in silence, her face growing harder with each page. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "This is beyond bullying, Maya. This is a sustained campaign of harassment and intimidation. Some of these comments cross into hate speech. Why didn't you tell someone sooner?" "I was scared," Maya whispered. "I thought if I reported it, I would just be causing drama. I thought they would say I was being too sensitive or making it up. I thought no one would believe me." Mrs. Patterson closed the journal carefully and handed it back. "Baby, listen to me very carefully. You are not causing drama. You are standing up for yourself. You are not being too sensitive. You are responding to abuse. And people will believe you because you have documented evidence. This journal is your power." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Principal Morris right now. You and I are going to walk to his office, and you are going to show him what you've shown me. And I am going to stand beside you the entire time, just like I promised." Principal Gregory Morris was a tall man with silver hair and a reputation for being fair but somewhat distant. When Mrs. Patterson and Maya appeared in his office with the journal, his expression shifted from mild annoyance at the interruption to serious concern as he read. He asked Maya questions. "When did this start? Who else has witnessed these incidents? Have you told your mother?" And Maya answered each one as clearly as she could. Mrs. Patterson corroborated everything she had personally witnessed in her classroom and the hallways. Principal Morris' jaw tightened as he turned the pages. "This is comprehensive documentation of systematic harassment," he said finally. "Miss Richardson, I want to commend you for having the courage to keep this record and to bring it to our attention. This kind of behavior has no place in our school." He picked up his phone and called the office secretary. "Please pull Brittany Chen, Madison Parker, and Ashley Williams from their classes and have them report to my office immediately. Also, contact their parents. We need meetings scheduled for tomorrow morning." He turned back to Maya. "You will not have to face them right now. Mrs. Patterson will take you to the counselor's office where you can wait comfortably. I will handle the initial confrontation. After the holiday break, we will reconvene with all parties present to determine appropriate consequences. But I want you to know that your documentation has given us everything we need to take decisive action." As Mrs. Patterson walked Maya to the counselor's office, she squeezed her shoulder gently. "You did the right thing, Maya. I know it doesn't feel like it yet, but you just took your power back." Maya nodded, feeling simultaneously lighter and more terrified than she had ever felt. That afternoon, as she waited for her mother to finish her shift and pick her up from school, Maya sat in the counselor's quiet office and thought about what came next. She had lit a match in a room full of gasoline. There would be consequences, reactions, fallout. But for the first time in 3 months, she felt like she could breathe fully. The next morning, Maya's mother accompanied her to Principal Morris' office for what he called a family conference. Brittany, Madison, and Ashley were already there with their parents, sitting in a row of chairs that had been set up facing the principal's desk. The 3 girls looked defiant and bored until Principal Morris placed Maya's journal on his desk and began reading selected entries aloud. The color drained from Brittany's face. Madison started crying immediately. Ashley stared at the floor. Their parents' reactions ranged from shock to anger to defensive denial. "This has to be exaggerated," Brittany's mother said, her voice sharp. "My daughter would never say such things. This girl is obviously trying to get attention." Principal Morris' expression remained neutral, but his voice was firm. "Mrs. Chen, we have corroborating witness statements from multiple teachers and students. We also have physical evidence including the vandalized locker and the note that was placed in Miss Richardson's desk. This is not a case of she said. This is documented, repeated, targeted harassment that violates our school's code of conduct and our anti-bullying policy." He outlined the consequences: a 2-week suspension for all 3 girls, mandatory counseling sessions, and a formal apology to Maya. If any further incidents occurred after they returned from suspension, expulsion would be considered. Brittany's mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. You are ruining my daughter's record over a misunderstanding. We will be contacting our lawyer." Principal Morris stood as well, his height and quiet authority filling the room. "That is your prerogative, Mrs. Chen. But I would advise you to carefully review the documentation before pursuing legal action. If anything, Miss Richardson would have grounds for a harassment lawsuit against your daughter and this school for failing to protect her sooner. I am trying to resolve this internally with educational consequences rather than legal ones. I suggest you accept that as the mercy it is." The meeting ended with tension crackling in the air. As Maya and her mother left the office, they passed Brittany in the hallway. The girl's eyes were red from crying, her usual confidence shattered. For a moment, their eyes met, and Maya saw something unexpected: genuine fear. Not of Maya, but of consequences, of accountability, of her perfect world crumbling. Maya felt no satisfaction in that moment, only a profound weariness. This was not victory. This was just survival. The Christmas break that followed was complicated. Maya should have felt relief, but instead she felt anxious, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Her mother tried to make their small celebration special, but the weight of what had happened hung over everything. On Christmas Eve, Maya volunteered with her mother at the community center, serving holiday meals to families experiencing homelessness. As she ladled soup into bowls and smiled at strangers who had their own burdens to carry, Maya felt her perspective shifting. She had been so consumed by her own pain that she had forgotten there were people fighting battles that made hers look small. An elderly woman named Dolores, weathered and wise, noticed Maya's troubled expression. "What's weighing on you, child?" she asked gently. Maya found herself telling Dolores everything: the bullying, the journal, the confrontation, the uncertainty of what would happen when school resumed. Dolores listened without interruption, her dark eyes never leaving Maya's face. When Maya finished, Dolores reached across the table and took her hand. "Baby, you did something most people never learn to do. You documented your truth and you spoke it out loud. That takes a kind of courage that most folks don't have. Now, I don't know how this ends for you, but I know this: you stood up. You didn't let them make you invisible. That matters more than any consequence they dish out to those girls." The wisdom in Dolores' words settled into Maya like a warm blanket. She realized that she had been waiting for some grand moment of vindication, some scene where Brittany publicly apologized and everyone acknowledged Maya's strength. But real life was not like that. Real resolution was quieter, more internal. It was the knowledge that she had faced her fear and acted anyway. It was the journal filled with her truth. It was Mrs. Patterson standing beside her. It was her mother taking time off work she could not afford to support her. It was this moment, serving soup to strangers, being reminded that everyone was fighting their own battles. When school resumed in January, the atmosphere was different. Word had spread about what happened, and students treated Maya with a new wariness, as if she were someone to be approached carefully. Some came to her with quiet words of support. "I'm sorry we didn't say anything before," one girl said, avoiding Maya's eyes. "We should have stood up for you." Others kept their distance, not wanting to be associated with the drama. Brittany, Madison, and Ashley returned from suspension visibly changed. They no longer traveled together in their confident pack. They kept their heads down and stayed away from Maya completely. The required apology was delivered in Principal Morris' office, stiff, awkward words that felt more coerced than genuine. Maya accepted it with a simple nod, not because she believed they were truly sorry, but because she was ready to move forward. Mrs. Patterson pulled Maya aside after class one day. "I have something for you," she said, handing Maya a large envelope. Inside was an application for a summer writing program at the local university, a prestigious opportunity for middle school students interested in creative writing. "I took the liberty of writing you a recommendation letter," Mrs. Patterson said. "Your journal showed me that you have a powerful voice, Maya. Not just in documentation, but in storytelling, in observation, in empathy. That is a gift, and it deserves to be developed." Maya stared at the application, overwhelmed. "I don't know if we can afford it," she said quietly. Mrs. Patterson smiled. "It is fully funded. Full scholarship. All you have to do is apply." That night, Maya sat at the small table in her apartment and began filling out the application. In the personal essay section, she wrote about her experience with bullying, about finding her voice through documentation, about learning that silence protected the wrong people. She wrote about Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Henderson and Dolores, about the people who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. She wrote about her mother's strength and her own journey from victim to survivor to someone who was learning to thrive. When she finished, it was nearly midnight. Her mother had fallen asleep on the couch, her nurse's scrubs still on. Maya gently placed a blanket over her, then returned to her room and added one final entry to her journal: "I don't know what comes next. But I know I'm not afraid anymore. Not like I was. I learned that my voice matters. That my story matters. That I matter. And that's something no one can take away." The acceptance letter came in March. Maya had been chosen for the summer writing program, one of only 30 students selected from across the city. When she told Mrs. Patterson, the teacher's eyes filled with proud tears. You are going to do great things, Maya Richardson, she said. Not despite what you went through, but in part because of it. You learned at 12 years old what some people never learn, that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in the face of it. The program began in June, and Maya found herself surrounded by other young writers who understood the power of words. She made friends, real friends, people who valued her mind and her perspective. She wrote stories about resilience and injustice and hope. She read her work aloud to strangers who applauded. She began to see herself not as a victim who had survived, but as a writer with something important to say. On the last day of the program, each student was asked to share what they had learned. Maya stood before the group, no longer the shrinking girl who pressed herself against lockers. I learned that our stories have power, she said. I learned that documentation is resistance. I learned that silence protects the wrong people, and that speaking up, even when your voice shakes, is always worth it. I learned that you don't have to be fearless to be brave. You just have to care more about the truth than about being comfortable. The room erupted in applause, and Maya felt something she had not felt in years: pride in herself, in her voice, in her story. When 8th grade began that fall, Maya walked through Jefferson Middle's doors with her head high. She was not the same girl who had arrived frightened and hopeful a year earlier. She had been tested and broken and rebuilt, stronger in the broken places. Brittany Chen had transferred to a private school, unable to face the reputation she had built for herself. Madison and Ashley were still around but kept their distance, chastened by consequences they had never expected to face. Maya had new friends now, including a boy named Jerome who sat with her at lunch and appreciated her sharp sense of humor, and a girl named Aisha who shared her love of books. Mrs. Patterson remained her mentor and advocate, always encouraging her to reach higher. One afternoon, Maya was called to the principal's office. Her stomach clenched with old fear until she saw Principal Morris' warm smile. "Don't worry, Miss Richardson. You are not in trouble. In fact, quite the opposite." He explained that the school board had been reviewing the anti-bullying policies across the district and had decided to implement a new program. They wanted student representatives to help design and lead it, young people who understood from personal experience what bullying looked like and how it could be prevented. They wanted Maya to be one of those representatives. "Your documentation, your courage, and your commitment to truth-telling impressed a lot of people," Principal Morris said. "You turned your pain into purpose, and now you have the opportunity to help other students do the same." Maya accepted the role, and over the following months, she helped develop a peer mediation program, updated reporting procedures, and created educational materials about recognizing and responding to bullying. She spoke at school assemblies and parent meetings, telling her story with hard-won confidence. She heard from other students who had been suffering in silence, and she helped them find their voices and their courage. The work was difficult, confronting her trauma repeatedly, reliving painful moments for educational purposes, but it was also deeply meaningful. She was taking what had been done to her and using it to protect others. She was turning her wound into wisdom. By the time Maya graduated from 8th grade, she had been featured in the local newspaper as a youth advocate against bullying. She had been invited to speak at a citywide education conference. She had completed her first full-length manuscript, a young adult novel about a girl who documents her way out of darkness. And she had helped at least a dozen other students find the courage to report their own experiences of harassment and abuse. At the graduation ceremony, when she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, the applause that followed her was genuine and warm. She had earned not just academic success but respect, the kind that comes from facing difficulty with integrity. That summer, before starting high school, Maya returned to the community center where she had served Christmas dinner the previous year. She was there to volunteer again, but also to see Dolores, the woman whose words had helped shift her perspective. She found Dolores in the same seat, as if she had been waiting. "There's my girl," Dolores said with a wide smile. Maya sat down across from her and told her everything that had happened since that Christmas Eve conversation. Dolores listened with shining eyes, nodding along. When Maya finished, Dolores reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I knew it," she said simply. "I knew you were going to be all right. You had that look, the look of someone who was done being broken." "I'm still scared sometimes," Maya admitted. "I still have bad days where I remember how it felt to be that girl pressed against the lockers, trying to disappear." Dolores nodded. "That's okay, baby. Healing isn't linear. You don't just get better and stay better forever. You have good days and bad days. But what matters is the trajectory. Are you moving toward the light, even when you stumble? That's all any of us can do." They sat together in comfortable silence, two souls who had both known darkness and chosen to keep walking toward light. When Maya started at Lincoln High School that fall, she was nervous but no longer terrified. She joined the school newspaper and the creative writing club. She made friends slowly but genuinely, building relationships based on mutual respect rather than desperate need for acceptance. She continued her advocacy work, partnering with organizations that fought bullying and discrimination. She wrote constantly, stories, essays, journal entries that helped her process her experiences and shape them into something meaningful. And when she encountered moments of casual cruelty or witnessed someone else being targeted, she no longer stayed silent. She spoke up, intervened, documented, reported. She had learned that bystanders were not neutral, silence was always a choice, and it always favored the bully. In her junior year, Maya's young adult novel was accepted for publication by a small press that specialized in diverse voices. The book, titled The Weight of Dignity, told the story of a black girl navigating bullying through documentation and self-advocacy. It was dedicated to Mrs. Patterson, to her mother, to Mrs. Henderson, and to Dolores, the women who had shown her that she mattered. When the book was published, Maya did readings at schools and libraries, sharing her story with young people who needed to hear that survival was possible, that their voices mattered, that they were not alone. She heard from readers across the country who saw themselves in her protagonist, who found courage in her words. The girl who had once felt invisible was now helping others become seen. On Christmas Eve of her senior year, Maya found herself back at Jefferson Middle School. She had been invited to speak at their holiday assembly, to share her journey with the current students. As she stood on that stage, looking out at the rows of faces, some confident, some uncertain, some clearly struggling, she remembered who she had been when she stood in these hallways. She remembered the fear, the shame, the crushing weight of being targeted. And she remembered the moment she decided to fight back, not with violence or cruelty, but with truth and documentation and the refusal to stay silent. "My name is Maya Richardson," she began, her voice clear and strong, "and I want to tell you about the year that nearly broke me, and how I found the strength to put myself back together. I want to tell you that if you are being bullied, it is not your fault. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining it. You are not alone. And your voice, your story, your truth, they matter." She told them about the journal, about Mrs. Patterson, about the terrifying walk to the principal's office, about the summer writing program and the book and the work she had done to turn her pain into purpose. She told them about the bad days that still came, about the healing that was ongoing, about the importance of asking for help and believing in your own worth. When she finished, the auditorium was silent for a long moment. Then a girl in the front row, younger than Maya had been, with the same wary expression Maya remembered wearing, raised her hand. "How did you know when it was time to speak up?" she asked, her voice small. Maya smiled gently. "I knew when the weight of staying silent became heavier than the fear of speaking. I knew when I realized that protecting my dignity mattered more than protecting my comfort. I knew when I understood that my silence was not keeping me safe, it was just keeping the bullies safe." She looked directly at the girl. "And if you are asking that question, I think you already know the answer for yourself. You are just looking for permission. So here it is, you have permission to speak. You have permission to take up space. You have permission to matter." After the assembly, a line of students waited to talk to Maya. Some wanted to share their own stories. Some wanted advice. Some just wanted to be near someone who had survived what they were surviving. Maya spoke to each one, gave each her full attention, treated each story with the respect it deserved. Mrs. Patterson watched from the back of the auditorium, tears of pride streaming down her face. When the last student finally left, Maya walked over to her former teacher and they embraced. "Thank you," Maya whispered. "For seeing me when I could not see myself. For standing beside me when I felt alone. For believing in my voice before I believed in it." Mrs. Patterson pulled back and looked at her with shining eyes. "Maya Richardson, you did the hard work. I just opened a door. You were the one brave enough to walk through it. And look at you now, opening doors for others. This is what it means to turn pain into purpose. This is what it means to be a warrior." That night, as Maya drove home through the dark December streets, she thought about the journey she had taken. From the terrified 12-year-old pressed against the lockers to the confident young woman who could stand on a stage and share her truth, it had been the hardest journey of her life, and also the most important. She thought about Brittany Chen, wherever she was now, and hoped she had learned something from what happened. She thought about Madison and Ashley, hoped they had grown into people capable of empathy and kindness. She thought about all the students who had watched her be bullied and said nothing, hoped some of them had learned that silence was a choice, that bystanders had power. She thought about Principal Morris and his willingness to take action. She thought about her mother's sacrifices, Mrs. Henderson's kindness, dolorous wisdom. She thought about every person who had shown her that she mattered, that her dignity was worth fighting for. Most of all, she thought about the journal, that beautiful leather-bound book Mrs. Henderson had given her, now filled with entries that had changed her life. It sat on her desk at home, an artifact of survival and resistance. Sometimes she opened it and read through the entries, remembering how it felt to be that girl writing in desperate documentation. And sometimes she added new entries, because the work of understanding yourself, of healing, of growing, that work never truly ended. It just evolved. And she was grateful for every hard-won lesson, every scar that had taught her something, every moment of fear she had pushed through to find her courage. As Maya pulled into her driveway, she saw her mother waiting in the window, and she felt a surge of gratitude for the life she had been given, not perfect, not easy, but hers. She had learned that dignity was not something given to you by others. It was something you claimed for yourself, defended for yourself, refused to surrender. She had learned that your story mattered, even when others tried to silence it. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear but action despite it. And she had learned that the weight of dignity, that invisible burden she had carried throughout those dark months, was also the source of her greatest strength. It was the thing that kept her standing when everything else wanted her to fall. It was the thing that made her matter, even when others wanted her to disappear. And now, as she walked toward her front door where her mother waited with dinner and love and the steady presence that had anchored Maya through the storm, she carried that weight differently. No longer as a burden, but as a badge of honor. She was Maya Richardson, survivor, advocate, writer, warrior. She was the girl who documented her way out of darkness. She was the girl who refused to be erased. She was the girl who learned that the weight of dignity, when carried with courage, could change the world.